I never thought a dog could tear a marriage apart. But there I was, standing in the kitchen of our small Ohio home, still in my faded pajama pants and a coffee-stained t-shirt, watching Nathan zip up his suitcase with the same detached focus he used for business trips, only this time he wasn't coming back. The morning light slanted through the window, catching the dust motes in the air, and I felt like one of them, weightless, drifting, unable to hold my ground. Nathan, my husband of 12 years, looked at me with eyes as flat as the linoleum floor and said, "I'm taking Max, you keep Liam." No goodbye, no negotiation, just those words, sharp and final, like he was dividing up furniture. Max, our German shepherd, whined softly from his bed in the corner, his tail thumping once, twice, before he sensed the tension and went still. I opened my mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. Nathan didn't wait for them. He clipped Max's leash onto his collar, the jingle of metal echoing in the quiet house, and headed for the door. That's when Patricia, his mother, piped up from her perch by the entryway, her fake pearl necklace glinting under the fluorescent light. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with that smug satisfaction she always carried. "At least the dog's trained." She chuckled, and Nathan's lips twitched into a smirk like they were sharing some private joke. Like my son, my 10-year-old, Liam, was a consolation prize I'd been stuck with while they walked off with the real treasure. I stood there, frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand how they could laugh when my entire world was cracking open. But I didn't. Not then. Not in front of them. Instead, I turned and picked up Liam's latest drawing from the counter, a crayon. Sketch of the four of us, me, Nathan, Liam and Max, standing under a giant yellow sun holding hands. The lines were wobbly, but the colors were bold, like Liam had pressed the crayons down with all his strength. I clutched the paper and walked past Nathan and Patricia, my bare feet cold against the hardwood, because Liam was in the next room. He didn't need to see this. Not yet. Liam was sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet, headphones on, coloring a new page in his sketchbook. At 10, he was all skinny limbs and messy brown hair, his focus so intense he didn't notice. The storm breaking around him. I knelt beside him, touching his shoulder gently, and he pulled off one headphone, looking up with those wide hazel eyes that always saw more than I wanted him to. "Is Dad leaving?" he asked, his voice small but steady. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Yeah, buddy. For a little while. But you and me, we're gonna be okay." He nodded like he believed me and went back to his drawing. But I saw the way his hand tightened around the crayon, the way the red lines got sharper, angrier. That moment, right there, I made a promise to myself. Liam would never think he was the problem. Nathan could take the dog. Patricia could think. She'd won. I'd take Liam. I wanted Liam. And I'd protect him from everything, especially from the people who laughed at his pain. But that's not the part I'm here to tell you about. The real story starts a few weeks later, on the day of our first custody hearing, when Liam, my quiet, observant boy, walked up to the judge, cleared his throat and asked, "Can I show you what Dad texted me last night?" The courtroom went, so silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. The judge raised an eyebrow. Nathan's lawyer's face drained of color. Patricia, sitting behind us in a navy blazer, her smug expression frozen, looked like she'd swallowed her own tongue. And in that moment, Liam held something more powerful than any lawyer's argument: the truth. He was only 10, but he knew. For the first time, the adults in that room had no choice but to listen, but to understand why that moment changed everything. I need to take you back to the beginning. It wasn't one fight that broke us. It wasn't one cruel comment. It was years of quiet erosion, of Nathan making me feel like I was always too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too everything. When Liam cried after Nathan snapped at him for spilling juice, it was my fault for not teaching him to toughen up. When I asked for help with the dishes or the bills, I was nagging. When I finally said I wanted out, Nathan told everyone I was unstable, that he was the one holding our family together. And people believed him. He had that charm, that easy smile, the kind of guy who'd tip a waitress extra and call her sweetheart, while she blushed. But Liam saw what others didn't. He saw how Nathan's face changed behind closed doors, how I'd stop mid-sentence when he walked into the room, how I stopped laughing. Not the fake laugh I used at his backyard barbecues, but the real one, the kind that used to come so easily. The day Nathan left, Liam didn't cry. He just sat next to me on the couch that night, holding Max's old collar, the leather worn from years of walks. "I don't think Dad likes us very much," he said, his voice so matter-of-fact it broke my heart. That was the beginning of the end. And, though I didn't know it then, the start of the truth coming to light. When you picture a single mum in a custody battle, you might imagine chaos, yelling, slamming doors, maybe even police lights flashing, in the driveway. But mine didn't start that way. It started with silence. The kind of silence that follows a tornado, when the wind stops, but the air feels heavy with what's been lost. Nathan took Max, his clothes, his fancy coffee maker, and left. Every drawer he emptied, every coat he pulled off the hook, echoed through our little house like a whisper. He's gone. Liam didn't ask many questions at first. He just kept drawing. Superheroes with capes, sunsets over jagged mountains, and sometimes Max, always Max, with a red cape tied around his neck. I tried to act normal, overcompensating with homemade mac and cheese and little notes in his lunchbox. "You're my hero, kiddo." I let him sleep in my bed most nights because he was scared of the dark again, something he hadn't been since kindergarten. Our house wasn't much, a 2-bedroom ranch with creaky floors and a backyard just big enough for a swing set. I painted Liam's room light blue and strung star-shaped fairy lights around the ceiling because he said they made him feel safe, like the stars were watching over him. I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, taking on logos and website mock-ups to pay the bills. It wasn't glamorous, and the money was tight, but it meant I could be there when Liam got off the school bus, his backpack bouncing as he ran up the driveway. Those moments kept me grounded, even when everything else felt like it was slipping away. Mornings were the hardest. Liam used to wake up chattering, asking a million questions about dinosaurs or why clouds looked like cotton candy. Now he was quiet, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his cereal bowl without eating. I'd watch him, my coffee going cold, trying to find the right words. "You okay, buddy?" I'd ask, and he'd nod. But his eyes said something else. He was hurting, and I didn't know how to fix it. I'd lie awake at night, replaying Nathan's words, "You keep Liam," like they were a curse I couldn't shake. Like my son was something to be discarded, a burden Nathan didn't want. But to me, Liam was everything. His quiet giggle, his endless curiosity, the way he'd hug me so tight it felt like he was holding me together. When Nathan and I first met, he was like a spark in a dark room. I was 23, working at a print shop in Columbus, designing flyers for local businesses. He came in for business cards, Nathan Carter, real estate, and left with my number. He was confident, funny, the kind of guy who made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We were married within a year, young and reckless, drunk on the idea of forever. By the time Liam was born, I was already making excuses for Nathan. He'd forget to pick me up from work, or he'd make offhand comments about my postpartum body, calling it banter. I'd laugh it off, tell myself he didn't mean it. But those moments piled up. He controlled everything. The bank account, the thermostat, how I disciplined Liam. If Liam got sick, Nathan blamed me for coddling him. If Liam had a nightmare, Nathan would roll his eyes and say, "Boys don't cry." I started sleeping with the baby monitor on, not for Liam, but for Nathan, to hear the edge in his voice when he thought I wasn't listening. Patricia was no help. She worshipped Nathan, thought he could do no wrong. Once, when I was exhausted from a sleepless night with a teething Liam, she looked at me and said, "You're lucky he puts up with your moods." I stared at her, wondering how many other women she'd said that to, how many she'd silenced with her judgment. I was tired, not just from parenting, but from pretending. Pretending we were happy, pretending I wasn't shrinking inside my own home, pretending Liam didn't notice. The final straw wasn't dramatic. No affair, no blowout fight. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. Nathan came home late, tossed his keys on the counter, and asked if Liam had done his math homework. "Yeah," I said, stirring pasta on the stove. He nodded, then added casually, like he was commenting on the rain, "Good. I don't want him growing up like you, scraping by with nothing to show for it." He walked away, checking his phone like he hadn't just cut me open. That night, I waited until he was asleep, then locked myself in the bathroom and cried on the cold tile floor. Not because I was sad, but because I was done. 3 weeks later, he was gone. He took Max, his pride, and any shred of decency he had left. "You keep Liam," he said, like it was a concession, like I'd lost some cosmic bet. But I hadn't lost. I had Liam, and that was worth everything. The first custody meeting was in a sterile office downtown, all beige walls and fake plants, designed to feel neutral, but suffocating instead. Nathan showed up 10 minutes late, striding in with a blazer and that salesman's smile like he was closing a deal. Patricia trailed behind, uninvited, carrying a Tupperware of lemon bars she offered to the receptionist, like we were at a church potluck. I sat across from Nathan, watching him perform, calm, polite, the picture of a concerned father. He talked about stability and routine, words that sounded hollow when he hadn't called Liam once since he left. Not a text, not a FaceTime, nothing. Yet here he was, asking for shared custody, week on, week off, like he'd been father of the year. I couldn't stay quiet. "He doesn't even check on Liam," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. "He doesn't show up. Why does he get half?" Nathan leaned back, smiling that infuriating smile. "Because I'm his father," he said, like it was enough. That's when I saw it. This wasn't about Liam. It was about control, about winning, about keeping his perfect image intact. And Patricia was his cheerleader, emailing me about Liam's diet, his clothes, how he looked a little pale in his school photo. She'd show up at school drop-offs, waving to other parents, acting like the doting grandma, while Liam stood there confused, clutching his backpack. Liam started asking harder questions. "Why does Dad say you don't want me to see him?" he'd ask, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you tell him I'm scared of his new apartment?" The worst was when he said, "Is it bad to cry when I miss Max?" That one broke me. He'd started drawing Max into every family picture, always standing between us like a shield. One night he came to me, holding his tablet, his face pale. "Dad told me not to tell you," he whispered. "But he says you cry too much, and I'll be messed up if I stay with you." I sat on the floor with him, holding him close, and promised myself I wouldn't let Nathan's words define him. I started documenting everything. Every text, every email, every time Patricia dropped by with her fake concern. My lawyer, Sarah, was blunt but kind. "Judges want evidence," she said. "Without something concrete, they lean toward shared custody." Evidence. The word haunted me because Nathan's damage wasn't in bruises or shouting matches. It was in the slow drip of manipulation, the way he made Liam doubt himself, doubt me. But then, one night, Liam handed me his tablet and said, "I don't think Dad meant for me to see this." I scrolled through the messages, my stomach twisting. Nathan had texted someone, maybe his new girlfriend, maybe a friend, ranting about Liam. He's soft, just like his mum. I'll fix him once I get more custody. Can't wait to be done with that burden and get my life back. My hands shook as I read it. Liam looked at me, his eyes glassy. "Is it my fault he doesn't want me?" he asked. "No," I said, pulling him close. "You're perfect. He's the one who's broken." That was the moment I knew we had what we needed, not just for the judge, but for Liam. He deserved to be heard, and soon he would be. The night Liam showed me those texts from Nathan, something inside me shifted. Up until that moment, I'd been treading water, trying to keep our little life afloat while Nathan's words and Patricia's smirks chipped away at me. But seeing those messages, can't wait to be done with that burden and get my life back, lit, a fire I didn't know I had left. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Liam, my 10-year-old boy who'd read his father's words and still had the courage to hand me his tablet. His voice small but steady. "The judge should know, right?" I hugged him tighter than I meant to, whispering, "Yes, baby, the judge needs to know." I sat on his bed long after he fell asleep, the tablet screen still glowing with Nathan's venom. The words looped in my mind. He's soft, just like his mum, useless. I wanted to scream, to call Nathan and tell him exactly what I thought of his real life without us. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, grabbed a notebook, and started printing the screenshots, labeling each one with the date and time. I backed them up on a flash drive, my hands shaking not from fear, but from purpose. This was evidence, the kind Sarah, my lawyer, had been begging for, the kind that could stop Nathan's charm offensive in its tracks. The next morning, I called Sarah before Liam woke up. I read her the messages over the phone, my voice low so I wouldn't wake him. "This is big, Emily," she said, her usually calm tone sharp with urgency. "This could change everything. But are you sure you want Liam to speak in court?" The question hit me like a punch. I hadn't even considered it. Not really. The idea of Liam, my quiet, sensitive boy, standing in a courtroom reading those words in front of strangers, made my stomach twist. He was 10. He should be playing soccer or drawing superheroes, not testifying against his own father. But then I remembered what he'd said weeks ago, after Nathan left. "You always tell me to speak up when something's not right. Is this one of those times?" I sat Liam down at the kitchen table that afternoon, a plate of graham crackers and a glass of orange juice between us. The fairy lights in his room glowed faintly through the open door, casting a soft warmth over the scene. "Buddy," I said, keeping my voice gentle, "you don't have to do anything you don't want to. But if you want to talk to the judge, if you want to tell him how you feel, I'll be right there with you. Every step." He looked at me, his hazel eyes serious beyond his years, and nodded. "Can I show him what Dad wrote?" he asked. "The judge needs to know the truth, right?" I blinked back tears, nodding. "Yeah, he does." The next few days were a whirlwind. Sarah arranged for the text messages to be submitted as evidence, working with a court clerk to ensure they were properly formatted and admissible. We built a timeline, piecing together Nathan's behavior, not just the texts, but the months of neglect, the way he hadn't called Liam on his birthday, hadn't asked about his asthma, hadn't even noticed when Liam started sleeping with his nightlight. Again. I dug through old emails, finding Patricia's passive-aggressive notes, just checking Liam's getting enough protein. He looked a little thin at school pickup. I saved every word a brick in the case we were building. Meanwhile, Nathan and Patricia didn't slow down. Patricia started showing up at Liam's school unannounced, always with some small gift. A cheap action figure, a card that read, "Daddy's fighting for you, champ." Liam would hand them to me after school, his face scrunched in confusion. "Why does it feel like a trap?" he asked one day, clutching a plastic Spider-Man figure. I knelt to his level, brushing his hair back. "Because it is, buddy. But you don't have to play their game." I reported each incident to Sarah, who filed a complaint about Patricia's interference. Nathan, predictably, texted me, "You're using Liam against me, weaponizing a kid. Real classy, Emily." I didn't respond. I'd learned long ago that arguing with him was like wrestling a shadow. It only exhausted you. Instead, I focused on Liam. Every night, we talked. Not about the court case, but about him. What he was feeling. What scared him. What made him feel strong. He asked questions I wasn't always ready for. "Why does Dad say you're keeping me from him? Is it okay that I don't want to sleep at his place?" I answered honestly. "No sugarcoating. Your dad says things to make himself feel better, not because they're true. And it's okay to want to feel safe, always." He'd nod, processing, and go back to his sketchbook, where Max now appeared in every drawing, a caped protector standing between us and some unseen danger. One evening, I found him sitting on his bed, staring at a drawing of Max with a red cape, soaring over a city. "Do you think Max misses us?" he asked, not looking up. I sat beside him, my heart aching. "I think Max misses you like crazy," I said. "He's probably chewing Nathan's shoes to pieces right now." That got a small laugh, the first I'd heard in days. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. The court date loomed closer, 2 weeks away, then one. I spent nights organizing our evidence, screenshots, emails, a journal I'd started keeping after Nathan left, noting every time he cancelled a visit or sent a snide message. It felt like assembling a puzzle of our pain, each piece a reminder of why I was fighting. Sarah warned me it wouldn't be easy. "Judges like balance," she said. "They don't want to pick sides unless the evidence is undeniable." Those texts are strong, but Nathan's good at playing the victim. Be ready for that. I was. I'd seen his act too many times, charming the neighbors, winning over teachers, convincing everyone he was the good guy while I was the emotional wreck. Nathan's performance didn't stop. He started showing up at school drop-offs wearing a world's best dad hoodie that made my skin crawl. He'd wave to the other parents, hand Liam a granola bar like he was father of the year, and drive off in his shiny SUV. Liam would climb into my car afterward, quiet, his shoulders hunched. "He didn't even ask about my spelling test," he said once, staring out the window. I reached for his hand. "I'm proud of you for getting all 10 words right," I said. He gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Patricia's meddling got bolder. One afternoon she cornered Liam's teacher, Ms. Carter, at pickup, asking about Liam's emotional state and implying I wasn't coping. Ms. Carter, bless her, shut it down politely and called me later. "I just thought you should know," she said. "Liam's been quieter lately, but he's still turning in his work. He's a good kid, Emily." I thanked her, my throat tight. Liam was good, better than good. He was kind, empathetic, the kind of kid who'd share his last cookie with a friend. And Nathan was trying to paint him as a problem to be fixed. The night before the hearing, Liam couldn't sleep. He lay beside me in my bed, the fairy lights casting soft shadows across his face. "What if the judge doesn't believe me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. I turned to him, brushing his hair back. "The truth doesn't need to be loud to be real," I said. "Just speak from your heart. That's all you need to do." He didn't say anything else, but he reached for my hand and held it tight, his small fingers warm against mine. I lay awake long after he drifted off, staring at the ceiling, praying I was doing the right thing by letting him speak. The morning of the hearing, we got dressed in silence. I wore a simple navy dress and small silver earrings, trying to look composed, like someone a judge would trust. Liam wore his school uniform, khaki pants and a polo shirt, freshly ironed with his favorite red sneakers. "They make me brave," he said, tying the laces with careful precision. I smiled, my heart swelling. "You're already brave, buddy. The The sneakers are just a bonus. Outside the Franklin County Courthouse, Sarah met us with her briefcase and a solemn nod. The building was all grey stone and tall windows, imposing in the early morning light. Nathan was already there, pacing in a charcoal suit, flanked by Patricia, and a man I assumed was his lawyer. He glanced at me once, his jaw tight, then looked away. Patricia's eyes narrowed, her lips pursed like she was biting back a comment. I ignored them both, focusing on Liam, who clutched his notebook, the one where he'd written his statement just in case. "You still want to do this?" I whispered as we walked inside. He nodded, his sneakers squeaking on the marble floor. "I'm ready." The courtroom was colder than I expected, the air heavy with the smell of paper and stale coffee. The walls were beige, the chairs stiff, and the silence was thick, broken only by the rustle of papers and the occasional cough. Liam sat beside me at the petitioner's table, his feet swinging just above the floor, his notebook in his lap. His hands were steady, but I could see the way he was clenching his fingers, the same way I did when I was nervous. Across the room, Nathan sat upright, his suit perfectly pressed, his face a mask of calm confidence. Patricia sat behind him, her navy blazer buttoned tight, her eyes scanning the room like she was the one on trial. When the judge walked in, Judge Thompson, a grey-haired man with a stern but not unkind face. Everyone stood. He settled at the bench, flipping through the case file, our names and documents stacked neatly before him. "Carter v. Carter," he said, his voice steady. "Let's begin." Nathan's lawyer went first, a polished woman in a grey suit who spoke with the confidence of someone used to winning. "Your Honor, Mr. Carter seeks shared custody, emphasizing routine and stability for the minor Liam Carter. He's demonstrated consistent interest in his son's well-being, maintaining contact and providing support." I clenched my jaw. Consistent interest. Nathan hadn't called Liam in months. He didn't know Liam's new favorite book or that he'd started soccer again, but the lawyer kept going, painting Nathan as the devoted father, the stable one, while I was just the emotional ex-wife. Sarah stood next, her voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, we're requesting primary physical and legal custody for Ms. Carter. We've submitted evidence of concerning communication from Mr. Carter, including messages sent directly to the minor that demonstrate a pattern of harmful behavior." The judge's eyebrow twitched. "To the child?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. And with the court's permission, Liam would like to speak." The room went still. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his eyes softening as they landed on Liam. "Are you sure, son?" he asked. Liam glanced at me, and I gave him the smallest nod, my heart pounding. He stood, his notebook clutched to his chest, and said, "I want to say something." His voice was soft but clear, cutting through the silence like a bell. The judge gestured him forward. "Come on. Up, Liam, take your time." Liam walked to the front of the courtroom, his red sneakers bright against the dull floor. He stood taller than I'd ever seen him, his shoulders squared, his hands trembling but resolute. He opened his notebook, took a deep breath, and began. "My dad sent me some messages," he said. "I wasn't supposed to see them, but I did. And I think you should know what they say." The air in the room shifted, heavy with anticipation. Sarah handed the bailiff the printed screenshots, which were passed to the judge. Liam held his own copy, his voice steady but catching as he read. "I'll fix that kid once I get him away from her. He's soft, just like his mum. Can't wait to be done with that burden and get my life back." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Patricia shifted in her seat, her face pale. Nathan's lawyer whispered something to him, her eyes wide. Nathan just stared at the table, his jaw tight, like he could will the words away. Liam looked up at the judge, his voice quieter now but no less firm. He was talking about me. "But I'm not a burden. And my mom's not weak. She's strong. She helps me when I'm scared." He paused, then added, I don't want to live somewhere I feel like a problem. I just want to feel safe. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Thompson folded his hands, his face unreadable, but his eyes locked on Liam. Thank you, Liam, he said. That was very brave. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Liam hesitated, then shook his head. That's all. He walked back to me, and I pulled him close, whispering, You did perfect. He nodded into my shoulder, holding on a little tighter than usual. The judge turned to Nathan. Mr. Carter, he said, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. Do you have an explanation for these messages? Judge Thompson's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade, his eyes fixed on Nathan. Mr. Carter, do you have an explanation for these messages? The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding as the silence stretched taut. I held Liam close, his small frame pressed against me, his red sneakers still beneath the table. His hands were steady now, the trembling gone, as if reading those words aloud had unburdened him of something he'd carried too long. Across the room, Nathan shifted in his seat, his polished facade cracking like thin ice. His lawyer, a woman named Ms. Hargrove, leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but Nathan's eyes stayed locked on the table, his jaw so tight I thought it might snap. Ms. Hargrove stood, smoothing her grey suit, her voice measured but strained. Your Honour, my client would like to request a brief recess to confer. The judge raised a hand, cutting her off. No recess, he said firmly, his gaze returning to Nathan. I've heard enough to know we're not pausing this. Mr. Carter, I'm asking you directly. Explain the messages your son just read to this court. Nathan cleared his throat, finally looking up, but his eyes darted past the judge, landing somewhere on the back wall. It was a misunderstanding, he said, his voice low, lacking the charm he usually wielded so effortlessly. Those texts weren't meant for Liam. They were taken out of context. I was frustrated, venting to a friend. I'd never say that to my son. I felt Liam tense beside me. His hand tightened around mine, and I knew he was replaying the words in his head. Can't wait to be done with that burden and get my life back. A misunderstanding. Nathan's excuse was as hollow as the promises he'd made during our marriage. I'll do better, Emily. I'll be there for him. Lies wrapped in a smile. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp. Mr. Carter, you're telling me you accidentally sent your 10-year-old son a message calling him a burden, and that this was, what, a private venting session? His tone carried a weight that made the room feel smaller, because from where I'm sitting, those words weren't just careless. They were cruel. Ms. Hargrove tried again. Your Honour, Mr. Carter has been under significant stress due to the separation. He's committed to co-parenting and ensuring Liam's stability. These messages don't reflect his true intentions. The judge didn't. Look at her. He looked at Liam, who sat straight, his notebook still open in his lap. Young man, he said, his voice softening, you were very brave to share that. I'm sorry you had to read those words. Is there anything else you want to say? Liam glanced at me, his hazel eyes searching for permission. I nodded, my heart pounding but proud. He stood again, smaller than anyone in the room, but somehow the tallest presence there. I just want to live with my mom, he said, his voice clear despite the slight waver. She listens to me. She makes me feel like I'm okay, even when I'm scared. Dad, he doesn't. He says things that make me feel like I'm wrong, like I'm not good enough. He paused, swallowing hard. I don't want to feel like that anymore. The gallery let out a collective breath, a soft murmur rippling through the sparse crowd. Patricia, sitting behind Nathan, shifted uncomfortably. Her navy blazer suddenly looking too tight, her face pale as if she'd been caught in a spotlight. Nathan's lawyer whispered something else to him, but he didn't respond. He just stared at the table. his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Judge Thompson folded his hands, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on me. "Ms. Carter," he said, addressing me directly for the first time. "Do you have anything to add?" Sarah, my lawyer, gave me a small nod, her eyes steady. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every tear I'd hidden, every moment I'd fought to keep Liam safe. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "I just want what's best for Liam. He's a good kid, smart, kind, brave. He deserves to feel safe and loved, not like he's a problem to be fixed. Those messages, they're not a one-time mistake. They're part of a pattern. Nathan's been absent, manipulative and dismissive, not just to me, but to Liam. I've raised him alone since Nathan left, and I'll keep doing it, whatever it takes. But I need the court to protect him from someone who sees him as a burden." The judge nodded, jotting something down. Then he turned to Nathan again. "Mr. Carter, anything else?" Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he looked small, stripped of the charisma that had carried him through life. "I love my son," he said finally. But the words sounded rehearsed, like a line from a script he hadn't practiced enough. The judge didn't respond immediately. He flipped through the stack of documents, our evidence, the screenshots, my journal entries, the emails from Patricia. Then he set them down, his hands deliberate. "The court's responsibility is to act in the best interest of the child," he said. "Based on the evidence, the testimony, and the remarkable honesty of this young man, I'm awarding full physical and legal custody to Ms. Emily Carter. Mr. Carter will have supervised visitation pending a family therapist's evaluation and ongoing monitoring." The words hit me like a wave, relief so strong it nearly knocked me over. I didn't cry. Not there. I just closed my eyes and breathed, feeling Liam's hand still in mine. Across the room, Nathan didn't argue. He didn't look up. He just sat there, cornered by his own words. Patricia stood abruptly, her purse clutched to her chest, and walked out before the judge even adjourned, her lemon bar optimism gone. "And Liam?" the judge said, his voice gentle again. Liam looked up, startled to be addressed. "You did a brave thing today. Don't ever forget that." Liam nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Can we get burgers now?" he whispered to me, his voice barely audible. I laughed, the sound surprising me. "Absolutely, buddy." We didn't talk about the courtroom on the drive home. Liam rolled down the window of our beat-up Honda, letting the June breeze tangle his hair like nothing monumental had just happened. Like he hadn't just stood up to his father in front of a judge and a room full of strangers. Like he hadn't just changed the course of our lives. But that's how kids are. They bend, they bounce back, even when the world expects them to break. We stopped at Benny's Diner, a little place on the edge of town with red vinyl booths, and a jukebox that only played songs from the 80s. Liam ordered a cheeseburger with extra pickles and a side of curly fries, his favorite. I got coffee, the same black drip I always ordered, and let it sit untouched, watching him instead. The way his eyes lit up when the waitress set the plate down, the way he used his fork like a shovel, the way he grinned when the ketchup bottle made a ridiculous squeak. For the first time in months, maybe years, he looked unburdened, like the weight of Nathan's words had finally lifted. "Did I do okay?" he asked mid-bite, ketchup smudged on his chin. I reached across the table, wiping his face with a napkin. "You did better than okay," I said. "You told the truth. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." He grinned, mouth full of fries, and went back to eating like he'd just won a gold medal. And in a way, he had. The final court documents arrived 2 weeks later, the ink still fresh on the pages that granted me full custody. Supervised visitation for Nathan, contingent on therapy and court oversight. terms he'd likely never meet. True to form, he didn't try. He disappeared from our lives almost overnight. No calls, no texts, no appeals. His lawyer dropped him, citing irreconcilable differences in strategy. Patricia stopped her school drop-off stunts, her emails, her gifts. The last I heard, Nathan had moved across the state to Dayton, shacked up with someone new, starting what he probably called a fresh chapter. I didn't care. Cowards run. That's what they do. At first, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd lie awake, expecting a new lawyer's letter, a loophole, some last-ditch effort from Nathan to twist the narrative again. But the silence held, and in that silence, something beautiful started to grow. Liam came back to life. His drawings, once small and cautious, exploded with color. Full comic strips with wild characters, robots fighting dragons, and me, always me, as a caped superhero wielding a spatula and a shield made of waffles. I hung one on the fridge right next to the grocery list like it was a masterpiece. Because it was. He started sleeping through the night. No more creeping into my bed at 2 a.m. with nightmares. His questions came back too, endless, curious, the kind that made me laugh and Google things like, do sharks have tongues? Or can you live on the moon? The sparkle in his eyes, the one I'd feared was gone forever, was back. He joined the soccer team at school, his red sneakers flying across the field, and I cheered louder than any other parent, even when he missed the goal. As for me, I started breathing again, real, full breaths, not the shallow ones I'd been surviving on. I took on new clients, designing logos for local businesses and even a website for a nearby bakery. The money was still tight, but it was enough to cover soccer cleats, a new sketchbook for Liam, and maybe, one day, piano lessons. I joined a book club at the community centre, nothing fancy, just a group of women like me, tired but healing, strong in ways we hadn't known we could be. We read novels about women who rebuilt their lives, and I'd sit there, sipping bad coffee, feeling like I was one of them. Sometimes people ask if I hate Nathan, if I'd drag him back to court if he ever showed up again. The truth is, I don't hate him. Hate takes too much energy, and I don't have room for it anymore. What I feel is sadness, for the father Liam could have had, for the man who chose control over love, for the boy Nathan must have been, who never learned to love without strings attached. But I don't carry his weight anymore. I let it go the day Liam stood up and spoke his truth. That day in court wasn't just about a custody agreement. It was about Liam's voice, about a 10-year-old boy who refused to be erased. It was about breaking a cycle, about showing Liam that love doesn't come with conditions and that kindness is never weakness. Nathan took Max, thinking he'd walked away with something valuable, something loyal and easy. He left me Liam. And let me be clear, I got the better deal. Liam's growing up knowing he's enough, just as he is. He's brave, honest, and kind, in a way that makes the world a little brighter. That courtroom didn't just give us custody. It gave Liam back his voice and me back my life. We're not perfect. There are still hard days, bills that stretch too thin, nights when I wonder if I'm doing enough. But then Liam will laugh, or he'll show me a new drawing, or he'll ask one of his wild questions, and I know we're okay. We're more than okay. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone going through this, any mother feeling invisible, any child feeling unheard, it's this: you are not powerless. Not when you have truth. Not when you have love. And definitely not when you have courage. Liam taught me that, and every day I'm learning it all over again. Months passed, and our little house in suburban Ohio became a home again. The creaky floors felt familiar, not empty. The fairy lights in Liam's room stayed on, a constellation of hope. I started painting again, not just for work, but for me. Watercolors, of sunsets and messy, joyful abstracts that Liam said looked like space explosions. He'd sit with me at the kitchen table, his own sketchbook open, and we'd create together, laughing when paint got on our noses. One Saturday, we drove to Benny's Diner again, just because. Liam ordered his usual cheeseburger, extra pickles, and I finally drank my coffee, savouring the warmth. He was halfway through his fries when he looked up, his eyes bright. "Mom, do you think we could get a dog someday?" he asked. I paused, the question catching me off guard. Max's absence still stung, a quiet ache in both of us. But Liam wasn't asking out of sadness. He was asking out of hope, out of a future he could imagine. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Someday, a dog who loves curly fries as much as you do." He laughed, loud and free, and I knew we'd made it. Not to some perfect ending, but to a beginning, one we were writing ourselves, one page at a time.